So good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, AI Digital Transformation, Cyber Resilience, what business in Vietnam should prepare for. And on behalf of our Australian Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, Auscharm Vietnam, and our co-host, the Vietnam International Arbitration Centre, VIAC, we would like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. So to officially open the webinar, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Edwin, Auscharm Executive Director, to deliver his opening remarks. So Edwin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Hung. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of AusCham Vietnam, it is my pleasure to welcome all AusCham and VIAC members, as well as other guests, to the third session of the AusCham VIAC 2026 webinar series, AI, Digital Transformation and Cyber Resilience, what businesses in Vietnam should prepare for. VIAC, or Vietnam International Arbitration Centre, is a valued strategic partner of AusCham, and our partnership is formalized through an MOU. This webinar series reflects our shared commitment to providing our respective members and the broader business community with practical knowledge to navigate an increasingly complex operating environment. Today's topic is particularly timely. AI and digital transformation offer enormous opportunities for productivity, innovation, and competitiveness, but they also introduce new legal, operational, and cybersecurity risks. The question for businesses is no longer whether these technologies will affect them, but how they can adopt them responsibly while building the resilience needed to manage these risks. We are fortunate to have three highly experienced speakers with us today: Russel Vic from QBE Asia, Luu Xuan Vinh from Asia Legal, who is also a VIC member, and Colin Blackwell from Enablecode. We are especially pleased that QBE Insurance Vietnam and Enablecode are both AusCham members, allowing us to showcase the expertise within both the AusCham and VIAC communities. Thank you to VIAC for working with us to organize today's session, and to our speakers for sharing their time and insights. I hope everyone finds the discussion practical, engaging, and valuable. With that, I'll hand over to Ms. Hung, our lovely host and Head of Advocacy and Partnerships, to beginning the session and introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edwin, for the warm welcome and opening remark. Before we officially begin our webinar today, there are the few housekeeping notes for you. Throughout the webinar, we encourage the attendee to submit the question via the Q&A chat box or the chat box as well. So we should try to address as many questions as we can. If the question is not addressed during the webinar, just don't worry. We will consolidate, we will collect all the questions, and we'll send you the feedback in writing after the webinar, alongside with the other material of this webinar, slide material, video recording, and the contact of the speaker as well. So the second housekeeping for you is that as I already mentioned, that we will share the presentation and with a short survey after the webinar. So we hope that you can take a few minutes to finish the survey to help AusCham and with VIC as well to improve our upcoming webinar in the future. So further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Colin Blackwell, the CEO of Enablecode. He will share practical insight on how AI driving the digital transformation and create the new opportunities for businesses. So Colin, the floor is yours now.
Thank you. So if we move over to my slides. So basically, I'm going to set the scene a little bit wider as to the correct approach on firstly AI transformation, and then the legal implications of that. So AI is a little bit different from previous technologies in that it is an intelligence. The name kind of gives it away here. And when you're dealing with an intelligence, it's more like dealing with a person than a tool. And so culture starts coming into it. And so one of the first things about moving into AI is the culture of your let's say, host company. So if you're an Australian company, there's a certain culture. the country you're operating in, the job sector you're in, the industry sector, many things like this. And what you've got is different countries moving at different speeds. So I saw this being presented by some professor in Singapore. They were saying they saw countries falling into 3 different camps. So the US and China are the innovators. Singaporeans saying they're in there as well, and like Israel and places like that. So they'll go ahead and move as fast as possible with AI, regardless of the risk. Then you've got other cultures like the European Union, Canada, Australia, where it's kind of trust first. They're a little bit more cautious, like, okay, what could be the risks? Let's look at things like the governance frameworks very carefully and then move ahead. But still, once they've decided to move ahead, they really will. Places like Korea, Japan are also in this camp. But then, previous slide, sorry. But then you've got many emerging markets. I'm thinking, places like Thailand, Indonesia. They are naturally hesitant, so they would see AI as a big change to the way things operate and would naturally resist that. And so I was thinking then, where does Vietnam fit in it? And Vietnam's a big place and a very complex place. So you see all 3 characteristics operating here at once. So you've got, at the innovation side, Vietnam is one of the first countries in the world to have a national AI strategy. And you've got some of the leading foreign invested companies absolutely going as innovators. Then you've got a large camp of like trust first, slight hesitation. And then you've got, people really resisting. Now, Vietnam already is what we often do, we call it a 2-speed economy. So I do a lot with the Vietnam Business Forum advising the government. And this is one thing they recognized. So almost all of the productivity gain and the driving of the Vietnam economy comes from the foreign invested sector. So the exact number is a Vietnamese person working for a foreign company in Vietnam is 3.7 times more productive than a Vietnamese person working with a Vietnamese company in Vietnam. So what AI comes in, it can make enormous productivity gains by automation. And what it means is that the companies that are already doing well, typically like Australian invested companies here, they start pulling ahead even further. Now, this is not to say that Vietnamese companies are uniformly slower. I was having a chat recently with a guy who was running an association. It was actually at the Australian consulate, a guy who was running an association of Vietnamese startup CEOs, thousands of them. And he was saying there are already so many Vietnamese startups where you have the founder, a few senior executives, and a swarm of AIs. So, things are moving incredibly fast at the moment. So there's a general requirement for companies to catch up and get a grip on this, but this is now a legal requirement, as I'll explain. Next slide, please. So as you'll see on the next slide, I've been here since 1995, and the old view of Vietnam is, cheap labor. This is why manufacturing comes here. That stopped being true quite some time ago. So if you go into a modern factory in Vietnam, it's all robots. And the reason why factories come to Vietnam is because of very good integrated supply chains and the knowledge of Vietnamese specialists for robotic intelligence. So this is teaching the robots how to automate factories. That's why the factories are here, not because of cheap labor. The same on the service side. Places like India, the Philippines were famous on business process outsourcing, where you have, swarms of people in offices just churning through stuff. AI can now do that. And so in the future environment where, let's say, Vietnam is competing with the Philippines, Vietnam has an advantage because it didn't have the over-reliance on these massive BPO centers, but it has some very, very high-skilled AI people who can do these kind of things. So within Vietnam, Vietnam is systemically important within the tech world. So you've got people like Samsung, NVIDIA, have their AI research globally here in Vietnam. You talk to people like Google, Microsoft, they have their very core, not just manufacturing, but a lot of things here in Vietnam. So Vietnam is a global leader in this AI space. So one thing that when AI is moving exponentially fast, so us humans, we're not very good at understanding and dealing with exponentials. Our brains are designed to deal with linear change. And governments, more than anything else, always are playing a little bit catch up. But when you have a technology changing literally by the day, it's very difficult for legislation to keep pace with it. So I was actually part of the global consultations with under the United Nations for the Global Digital Compact, where it was a number of countries coming together, looking at how safe is AI in the future of humanity. And it was a very good effort. But I just watched that for a few days. It was actually held in India. And my conclusion was that governments are not going to be able to slow this down, but they will have a good shot at regulating it in a sensible way, like everything else is regulated. So, a bank has to have an operating license. An airline has to follow safety standards. So when you're looking at this legislation, it's slower and more reactive, just because it's trying to deal with a very fast moving target. Vietnam actually has a track record of often being the first in the world to enact a piece of legislation. So, a lot of, I remember with the United Nations before, legislation like children's rights or equality, Vietnam was actually some of the first in the world to often put in a UN charter into their own law. So it doesn't surprise me that Vietnam is very quick. The government here plays a very good game. But, it's the very basic things that the Vietnamese law is tackling. So one of the first ones to point out here is an operational reality of shadow AI usage. So a lot of companies hesitate about putting AI in, and for valid reasons. They say, make sure we have this trust, we have the governance, the compliance thought through. But because of that hesitation, especially in Vietnam, Vietnamese people have some of the highest AI usage rates on a consumer basis, often in global rankings, second only to China in the world. When I go into a room full of Vietnamese in a client company, I say, hands up who's already using GPT, every hand goes up. When I do the same thing in Europe, only half the hands go up. So in Vietnam, the reality is almost every single staff member is giving their job to AI already. And most of that is in secret. They're not discussing it. So when I talk to a CEO, I'd say, okay, if you could do a week's work in an hour, would you tell your boss if he didn't ask you? And the CEO's like, yeah, of course. And I say, well, all your staff are doing that at the moment. But then what it means is companies have lost control of what's going on. Because if you look around a room of staff and some of them are taking a week to do a task, the other one's taking an hour, and it's at random, how do you know you got the right number of staff? How do you know what your quality level is? How can you promise anything to a client when you're going to deliver something at what standard? You just completely lost management control when there's rampant shadow AI. But what the law is now saying is, if that's your company, just because you have no idea what's going on in your company does not mean you can escape from the responsibility. You have to know what's happening in your company. This is very important. So here's, to show that these laws have already come through. And it's not just one law, it's like 5 different laws. Now, the lawyers are going to go through this in a lot more detail, but it's already happened, right? So these are the exact laws, and between them, they kind of do actually put together a coherent model. And that last one, especially the digital transformation law, sets out the overall framework. So it is live at the moment. You do have to do something about it. It's already in law. Now, as always in Vietnam, there's some implementation challenges. The government, the provinces have to get a little bit used to, in the departments, how exactly to enforce this law. It's going to be driven by individual incidents. So if something goes wrong, you know, you'll get a knock at your proverbial door and be asked to prove the your documentation. Basically, this is what you've got to do. In very practical, simple terms, you have to do this digital transformation to regain control of your own company first, because you can't document something you don't. So the law says you have to document this. So you have to know what you're documenting. So if there's loads of shadow AI and you haven't gone top down on your digital transformation, you wouldn't know what to write down on a document, right? So imagine this, right? So a parallel. If you'd lost control of your company accounts and the tax authorities come to your office, knock, knock, let's see all your documentation to see you've paid the right tax. And if you said to them, oh, look, yeah, like there's a bunch of numbers and bits of paper floating around, I have no idea what they all mean, then the tax authorities would chop your head off, right? So the same is for your AI. It's the same level of professionalism. So what AI workflows do you have running on what processes? Do you know as a manager what is going on? And if you don't, you're still liable for it, right? So you have to get a grip. So what I often do in companies is often it's drifted, because the average employee is walking into the office with a more powerful AI on their phone than the company's providing them. So, you know, your data can be going anywhere. Anything could be happening because the staff hasn't been trained on how to responsibly use that AI. They're often giving AI slop, unreviewed stuff in a completely uncontrolled ways to your customers. That is your legal responsibility, even if you don't know what's going on. So, you know, something like an AI amnesty within a company, make it fun, turn it into a competition. So you say, look, I apologize, I never asked this question before, but let's department by department go through, train you how to use AI on a company provided system. So here's your AI account. This is now our intellectual property, because this is our secret recipe for, you know, doing our business. It has to be within the company intelligence framework. And I promise I'm not going to tell anyone off when you show me that you've been given your job to an AI already, because it's my fault I didn't ask the question. So just show me what you're already doing. Let's correct it. Let's integrate it. Let's put it under policies. Let's, you know, follow the law. And the best idea of the day gets 10 million dong for an innovation prize, right? So you've got to go through that process before you can document. So once you've done through that classifying, and also there's the law is, I'm sure we'll go into more detail, but there's high risk things. So nobody likes, in any country, the law is very similar in Australia, Europe, wherever. You can't have AI black boxes without human review, especially if it's on something sensitive like a bank handling people's sensitive information, making loan decisions, a company deciding how to hire and fire people based on AI without human review. This is crazy dangerous from an operational perspective, but also classified by law in Vietnam and other places. So it's the same standards as when you're managing people. So when you're managing people, obviously you have management layers and standard operating procedures and policies for the same reason when humans were the only intelligence. The same now applies to AI. So you don't have AI running something without management checkpoints, without documentation. And the good thing actually about AI, so I'm over at a company at the moment doing an AI transformation, and there's a huge amount of automation happening, but the AI is really good at documenting that. So we document it anyway, but when you document all of the new job descriptions, KPIs, individual workflows, all of these things, you just ask the AI, when you document it, make sure it's compliant now with these new Vietnamese laws, so that if anyone comes knocking, I've got them printed out. And of course, the AI changes by the day. You just keep that updated as you go. So basically, you know, the AI, when you use one of the new GPT desktop, it has on the right hand of the screen your inputs, your throughputs, your outputs. So this is exactly the same as what the law is asking. Know what goes into the model, what's the purpose. So you have for each workflow a document, almost like a job description for what that AI workflow does. And then what is the impact of that? And you have to have a named person in charge of it and be thinking, okay, if this goes horribly wrong, what is our response? Have we tested this? Have we gone through it? Can we prove we've done these things? And you'd want to do so for commercial reasons. So, you know, where did the clock start ticking? The law says, okay, 60 days from when your process starts. Shadow AI, that didn't start 60 days ago. That started 2 years ago, right? So you're already in breach unless you know exactly who's doing what on your company. And if you've done nothing, if you've been hesitating for the noble reasons of compliance and governance, you are in the worst possible situation at the moment because you have no idea what's going on and who's doing what. And the policies that you have are just being ignored anyway. But that's not good enough. The law says, even if your policies, you have no clue what's going on, that is still your, it's a mindset problem, right? It's a leadership problem. The tech is easy, you just talk to it. But this is a leadership management organization and now being enforced as a legal issue. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Right. So, as with anything, AI is very new, but it actually calls back on a lot of the skills we are actually familiar with dealing with. So, like a project plan. So, first, you can do this even quicker, quite honestly, but I'm just being nice to say, look, spend a month, the first month, finding out where your shadow AI is, your data flows, mapping it all together. The new technology actually links, orchestrates data flows and AI automations together for the first time, which is quite fun to find out, and enormous productivity gains when you do it. But then you go through really a new view of risk. So the risk is quantifiable. So if your company goes bust because your competitors do AI before you, that is a risk, right? So people always try and look too much at policy risk, but if the policy is being ignored in the first place, because either it's obsolete, then that's your risk. So, and the risks, you know, a lot of people, they'll come up, because AI is so new, with almost an emotional thing where they're like, oh, I was watching something on TikTok and it said AI is dangerous, so I'm going to hesitate and not do anything about it. It's like, well, look, okay, quantify this. What does the law say? What do my policies say? I often talk with companies, and it's something really simple, like, you know, they'd say, oh, my data is going to leak. And I'm like, well, did you read the contract with the AI provider? And they're like, no. I said, well, do you normally read contracts? And they're like, yes. And so, you know, you go back to first principles. What is the professional, legal, risk control things you do? And you apply that then to AI professionally. And this law is forcing you to do that. What I'm saying here, look, again, is AI is not a tool. It is not a tech problem. Using AI is so simple. You just talk to it. Building an app, building a workflow, building a site, you just go in, you press the microphone, you talk to it in plain English or Vietnamese or whatever you want, right? It understands you. And so it's not technically difficult. But the human is the bottleneck in this situation. The only thing more complicated than one human is a whole office full of humans. So organizational psychology is even more complex than our individual society. So this becomes a leadership issue. It's a mindset thing. And so, you know, the leader is now legally obliged to do this. So it's about adaptability. You have to be humble and brave at the same time. These are the new competencies to be successful at AI. So I talked about the culture, the speed of learning. So in Vietnam, let's say the culture around learning is, you do a formal course, you spend 4 years at university and get a piece of paper with a stamp on it. AI moves so fast that the changes that happen today, I mean, every single day I go into my GPT, there's an update button and all the functionality changes. How do you learn that? You watch a YouTube video. Is anyone going to give you a certificate, a pat on the head saying, well done, now you know how to do it? Well, either you can do it or you can't. But companies have to get a grip of this, that someone in the company, the leadership, has to personally know how to use AI so that no one can, pull a fast one on them, but also lead, because the staff are asking, okay, I've heard about all this AI stuff. I want your leadership. Tell me what to do. And if you aren't doing anything, that's a failure of leadership. It's going to have enormous performance, commercial, operational problems for your company, but now the legal one as well. So let me say this in some, plain Aussie straight talk here, right? So if it is necessary for the law to make being stupid about not adopting AI, if it takes the law to make stupidity illegal, to slap some slow companies awake, then good on the law, fair dinkum, right? This is the right thing, that the law now forces hesitant companies to survive, because this is a matter of company survival, right? So if very often in a company, I'll see that they can get performance jumps of, 2 times, 4 times performance increases when they put in AI. Now that's a matter of survival for a company. And the government here is very worried that these slower Vietnamese companies aren't doing that. They're hesitating. So this law gives them a bit of a proverbial kick up the rear end to say, now you have to lead your companies. You got to know what's happening in your company. You have to organize and document, because if you have lost control of your company, you're rolling that dice every day, waiting for something to go horribly wrong. Either you go out of business because you're uncompetitive, your pricing model becomes obsolete, or you get a legal problem, an employee, a customer complains because you've got uncontrolled AI use or just aren't performing. And then the government's going to say, prove that you were in control of your company, you knew what was happening in your own company. And if you say, I have no idea what's happening in my company, that is not a legal defense. So you'd want to do this to be competitive and earn your money. Fortunes will be made and lost during this time, right? So you want to do this for commercial reasons, but now it is mandated by law. And the new law, so it is governance and compliance, but it's not something mysterious. This is something you solve. You go through, look at the if you're in banking, go to the compliance addendum from your AI supplier and give it the agreement to the banking regulator saying, yes, I am compliant. End of story, right? So the lawyers who are going to follow in my presentations are going to take you through this very necessary detail. But this is a solution. You have a professional yes or no. So you don't let the emotions run wild on something that you feel unsure about because it's new for all of us, right? Of course, it's only human to worry about something new. We're not designed for this exponential change, as I said, but solve. Is there a data security, privacy, whatever concern? The lawyers will tell you, yes, no, solve it, move on, get a grip, get a control of your company, document it, then your business is happy and the lawyers are happy and the government's happy as well. So these are the principles. This is the wider level that I would say to lead in then to the next presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for sharing very valuable insights. So our next speaker is Mr. Russel from QB Asia. Sam will discuss about the evolving cyber threat landscape and also practical strategy for business, how to strengthen their cyber resilience. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Sam Russell-Vick. I'm based in Singapore. I manage QBE's cyber insurance practice across Asia, and we have a wonderful team in Vietnam as well, supporting all of our clients and our QBE team based in both Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. So we're going to take a look over the emerging cyber threat landscape, taking a real deep dive on AI, looking at from an insurance perspective, where we're seeing claims from our clients, what are the new risks which we are facing. I'll then give you kind of a high-level overview of some of the coverage options that you have as well, and then look at some particular claims case studies. Given the nature of the audience here, it is case studies around legal firms and professional services firms that we've managed cyber incidents for. Emerging cyber threat landscape. People have probably heard of ransomware, so malicious software used by threat actors, which will encrypt your network, and they demand money in return for that. Globally and in Vietnam and across Asia, this is still the #1 threat we are seeing. That is still the #1 driver of claims. But then when we look at the types of extortion, so the tempo of the extortion attacks has increased. And what I mean by that is threat actors are now using AI themselves to automate much of their criminal operations and attacks on companies. The time it takes for a threat actor to look at your company, attack your company, and be able to demand an extortion from you is reducing. And that is becoming quite scary for our, obviously from an insurance perspective and claims, but also from our clients as well, which is more important. Social engineering, so looking at the human aspect and manipulating individuals to give up confidential information, to transfer money. Again, we're seeing an increase in this. With our claims in Vietnam, and specifically, we're seeing a much larger claims trend coming through with more fund transfers, people who are getting essentially scammed, socially engineered to fraudulently transfer money, which they think is to a legitimate entity, but it's not. And again, AI is playing a huge part in that, particularly around language capabilities, AI deepfakes, video calls, things along those nature. Supply chain risk is huge. We're talking about, you invest a lot of time to look at your own particular network and your own risk in your own company, but we rely massively on third-party companies. At the moment, we're using Zoom. Most people are using probably Windows and all sorts of other third-party software and management tools. How do you manage and govern those ones? Because we're seeing a lot of claims come through from your particular vendors who get impacted, which then impacts yourself as a company. And that is very hard to manage from a risk perspective. Payments as well. So, the percentage of extortion cases resulting in a payment has actually increased. What I find interesting about this is because threat actors are changing their tactics. There was a time where people were able to recover from their backups, which was resulting in far less ransom payments being paid. But the criminals are realizing this, so they're now looking to target your backups as well, because if you can compromise not only your victim's systems, but erase all of their backups, it is much harder for the victim to recover, and therefore they are much more inclined and motivated to pay the ransom to get everything back. State-sponsored activity, we're seeing an increased use from this, not naming any specific countries, but with all of the geopolitical activity happening in the world, cyber threats on a state level is becoming a real threat, particularly for any critical national infrastructure companies, which leads me into my next one, long-term access. So particularly in the critical infrastructure space, state-sponsored activities to gain access into foreign entities' critical infrastructure, whether that's telecom, utilities, financial systems, and position themselves for long-term access. So when they want to gain access and they want to use a cyber attack, that is happening as well. And then going in as well, people have probably heard of quantum and the risks it faces to decrypting. That long-term access, we're seeing people, for the criminals as well, they're stealing and harvesting a lot of data, which may be encrypted and they can't access it, but they're waiting for the quantum wave to come through and they can decrypt later, and then they'll be able to use that. So that is a real threat we're looking at as well. So not just AI, but also quantum coming in as well. And finishing off, AI usage, Colin very articulately spoke about this before. AI usage is at an all-time high, but that is not only a risk for companies, criminals are also using it as well. So how we're managing and governing the use of our AI is incredibly important. And then that's a real risk to companies as well, not only from a legal perspective, but from an operational perspective as well. So Gen AI, a weapon, how's it being used? Social engineering, identity generation. This is probably one of the biggest things which has been done. The ability for criminals to target operations, identity impersonation, AI deepfakes, the barrier to entry is reduced so much, which is leading to far more number of attacks, far more sophisticated attacks. So as a company, if you are not prepared for this, if your staff and your employees are not aware of these risks, you're far more susceptible to falling for these AI attacks. Vulnerability exploitation, we've probably heard of the Mythos and the Claude AI, and that is absolutely true. Using my point before about the barrier to entry. So the ability to find vulnerabilities before AI used to take sometimes months, if not years, to figure out vulnerabilities in softwares and networks. AI is reducing that time and more vulnerabilities are coming out. But it's not all doom and gloom. There is, on the defensive aspect as well, the cybersecurity tools you are using are also using AI. So they can combat this, they can respond, they can patch and protect against this as well. So while it is a threat, there are also some positives to take out of this as well. Multilingual adaptation. I think for myself, this is the biggest thing, particularly across Asia, which is such a diverse region, which has so many different languages. Vietnam as well, and even the level of English is relatively good. A huge percentage of the population do speak Vietnamese, and if the cyber criminals are attacking Vietnamese companies using Vietnamese for AI deep fakes, language capabilities, the chances of success as a criminal is much higher. So we're seeing this all around the world. It's not specifically to Vietnam, but countries around the world which did have language capabilities, because the threat actors previously would focus predominantly on English-speaking countries in Western Europe or the US, Australia, Singapore. They are now able to broaden the scope of their threat landscape by using the AI capabilities around language. I gave an example there in Hong Kong, an incredibly sophisticated long-time scam and deep fake around to an engineering firm, and the CFO ended up transferring $25 million US, which they thought was a legitimate transaction, but it was not. It was to a criminal organization. So a real risk to all companies. It's not specific to Western Europe or the Western world. We had a great report we looked actually across our claims across the world, across Asia, and the legal and professional services sector was flagging as one of the highest ones which were being attacked. And there's probably a few reasons for that, but let's kind of dig into that. So the cyber threat is there, the attacks are coming against them. It's one of the most targeted sectors. We're seeing a huge amount of social engineering attacks against legal firms as well. The exploitation of critical vulnerabilities is there. Ransom payments as well in the legal sector is going up. So the graph at the bottom, if you can see, year on year, it is increasing. And we get this information from our QB claims history, as well as bringing in from third-party sources as well. And we have many claims across Asia, which I'll do again. We're seeing new ransom groups emerging, threat actor criminal groups, because as some of them are getting shut down, new ones pop up. So the sophistication of these organizations is becoming almost to a legitimate corporate organizational level. They have hierarchies, they have organization structures, they have professional full-time criminals working for them as well. Saw an interesting article from Straits Times and CNA about a lot of the scam sectors in Cambodia at the moment, targeting Southeast Asian countries. Now, while there's pressure from countries like China and ASEAN to try and put pressure on the Cambodian government to bring a stop to some of these scam entities, it is very, very difficult to do, and we're seeing a lot of that coming out of the region as well. If please scan the QR code at the top, that will lead us to a publicly available report from QBE around cyber risk in the legal and professional services sector. Asia threat landscapes are where are we seeing it? Where does Vietnam stack up? So right up there with some of the largest countries in Asia, some of the largest economies. I would actually say this particular number, because this is based on publicly known ransom events from year to date already, but I would say this is relatively low due to sometimes the underreporting and the newer regulations coming into Vietnam, which is just starting out with mandatory reporting and things along those lines. So I would say this number is a very conservative number, and it's probably a bit higher. So let's look at this from a cyber coverage perspective when you're looking about cyber risk in AI in general. I like to think of it in three distinct parts. It's your third-party liability aspect, your first-party risk, so looking at yourself as a company, as well as the business interruption and reputation risk following that. So third-party risk, what's the situation around the world? This is a wonderful article by The Economist about data is the new oil. there's so much value in the data we have these days. A lot of our companies and organizations just wouldn't be able to operate around it. Regulators around the world are bringing in new laws and regulations, particularly around the development and use of AI. Data privacy laws are becoming more onerous. So these are things which we're seeing happening around the world. And why is this a concern? Why is this a problem to you as companies? Well, because it's more onerous, there are fines and penalties are increasing. The laws are ever changing. Your ability to keep up to date with your requirements becomes far more difficult because of just the pace of change with these regulations coming through, particularly in Vietnam as well, around the governance of AI use and development of these models and your use of it. So cyber insurance is there to definitely help. It will cover against all the data privacy aspects. You can get cover around your regulatory requirements, around notification obligations, regulatory fines and penalties, not just from a data privacy perspective, but also around your development and use of AI as well. So this is a particularly new coverage we're coming in to assess the very new risk that your companies are facing. So from a first party perspective as well, what is the current situation? Technology is used everywhere. IT, just imagine if you couldn't use your emails for a week. I mean, that is going to be a problem to any organization, whether you're an insurance company, a law firm, a manufacturing company. We're so connected. I think this is a wonderful image on the right, which is an overview of all of the subsea cables connecting us. Just how integrated we are. The global economy is a miracle of human ingenuity and engineering as well. It is quite incredible how it's transformed our lives. But it's a problem as well because criminals know this. This is why cyber extortion is increasing. The average ransom payment from our research and from our claims as well is increasing to $296,000 per case. Obviously, some are less, some are more. But not always cyber attacks. We're more vulnerable to technology failures. People may remember the CrowdStrike outage. Now, CrowdStrike was not a cyber attack. CrowdStrike is your cybersecurity vendor, which is meant to be helping you. They had an issue which knocked out a lot of companies' systems. We were talking airports were taken offline, manufacturing firms were down for weeks. This wasn't a cyber attack. So when we think about cyber risk, it's not always about the criminal gangs. It is your operational risk as well. Again, cyber insurance is there to support as well. So when things happen, you get access to specialist incident response service providers. Much like if your house is on fire, you call the emergency services and you get access to the fire brigade or an ambulance if you ever need this. Similar kind of concept within the cyberspace specialists who can help you recover to this. Looking into the ransomware space as well, professionals who specialize in ransom negotiations, because many of the ransom demands we support our clients with, you either don't have to pay or you can negotiate it down. Ultimately, you're dealing with criminals at the end of the day and they want to get paid. So having people to lean on and support against that is really, really important. We're seeing a lot of increase in going into the AI space, large language models being compromised and hacked, and your utility bills from using your, whether it's a Mythos or Gemini use, people are getting hit with huge costs where it might be a few thousand a month, suddenly hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, because the hackers are, leveraging this, they're attacking these for their own criminal gains and motives. Business interruption risk. This to me is agnostic of geography. It doesn't matter if you're in the Western world, you're the US or Vietnam. Every company will have business interruption exposure. So when we look at it from a cyber perspective, technology has enabled us to be more efficient. Colin had a great statistic before around AI has enabled us to be hugely more productive in Vietnam as well, something like 4 times. So there's a huge benefit to using this technology. But again, it comes with a problem. There is a risk to this. What if you can't access your emails for a week? What if you can't access any of your network? What if your customers can't access, whatever it is, your third-party tools? That will lead to a loss of business revenue to nearly every single company out there as well. And that is a massive problem. So that's where cyber insurance comes in as well. There is coverage around your business interruption exposure from a very broad variety of incidents. I spoke about cyber attacks. I also spoke about non-malicious cyber attack. That's the CrowdStrike incident, because not always everyone is trying to hack you all the time. Sometimes things just do go wrong, and that will cause business interruption, and the policy will be there to smooth over that risk and protect your company's balance sheet from that. From a reputational perspective as well, but we see it particularly in the legal and professional services sector. if you are down and you're working on a client's very big deal, maybe an M&A activity or whatever it is, and due to a cyber attack, you can't support them, they miss deadlines, or you compromise or information is disclosed about your clients. People can be quite sensitive. You could lose those customers. They could go to a potential rival law firm. So the insurance policy can also help you quantify that and help reimburse you for loss of income from that reputational exposure. So very, very broad in the insurance space. We'll dig into a claim case study. So this was an Asia-based law firm we were dealing with as well, due to a vulnerability with one of their third-party VPN systems. So again, this wasn't even their fault that they were using a VPN, which was compromised, and the threat actor managed to gain access to it with credentials, which were skimmed from using AI, hacking into one of the large language models, finding compromised credentials, and then breaching through the VPN. They encrypted the law firm's network. They stole a lot of sensitive data, which as well they were threatening to release. And this sensitive data, as a law firm, I don't need to explain to the people on this call. Nearly everything you're holding is very, very sensitive. You are a law firm, and your clients will demand the absolute confidentiality of when you're holding their information. There was an extortion demand of $400,000. They called the response services. QB's response team was able to come there and support them. They were able to wipe the ransomware. They were able to help work on the ransomware. They were negotiating with the specialists. They were able to get the demand down from $400,000 for $100,000. The demand was paid. They helped facilitate that payment. They also helped with the legal and compliant obligations around sanctions obligations, because you can't always pay to a criminal entity, potentially if they're based in Russia or Iran or any other sanctioned country. I know in Vietnam, there's potential gray areas around making payments in cryptocurrencies, so how do you facilitate that? So access to independent organizations paid for by the insurance that can help you navigate this complex environment and help you recover is a hugely valuable, I believe, part of the insurance program as well. And just the lastly at the bottom there about the regulatory notification, because you do have a huge amount of regulatory requirements, whether you're just based in Vietnam, but you might be a Vietnamese organization with entities across ASEAN or across the world. You also have obligations in those entities as well, and they will vary on country to country. And it is very difficult for you as an organization to know what you need to do in these situations. We had one recently where we had to help a client do notifications in 35 different jurisdictions. Now, that is beyond most entities' ability to do on their own. So having access to people who can help you do that, again, is hugely valuable in my opinion. So help the insured restored. We supported them with the regulatory use, cost effectively managed the situation as well, because part of our vendors, we have negotiated rates and you're getting the best quality service, and also coordinated sort of a company-wide response to this as well to help manage the reputational and operational fallout from that as well. So very, very proud of this particular situation, and our client, we believe, is very, very happy at the end of that as well. If you'd like to know more about kind of the insurance perspective, it comes in kind of 3 pillars. You get a lot of pre-risk services well in the insurance market, and I'm promoting QBE here, but a lot of other insurance companies will also offer this as well. So I'm not going to glorify it too much, but I am very proud of what QBE can offer yourselves. Again, please check out our website for all the pre-risk services to help you with your cyber risk. The cyber insurance coverage is well very broad, particularly around new emerging AI risks, the regulatory use and development of AI as well. You can get cover around that. And the response, what I spoke about, the response teams helping you deal with specialists, ransom negotiators, whatever it is, dedicated people who can help you through a whole different variety of risks. And that brings me to the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Sam, for a very interesting presentation. And before we move on to the final presentation, I would like to thank you for all the attendees. I can see that we are having a very active communication in the chat box. And also I see that there are few questions coming to the Q&A chat box. So the speaker, Mr. Sam, Colin, and Edwin, if you have a time, can you please answer the questions so we would ensure that we can address as many questions as we can. And coming to the final presentation today, I would like to introduce Mr. Luu Xuan Vinh, the founder and managing partner of Asia Legal. and also the arbitrator VIAC, who will provide the legal perspective on AI digital transformation and the regulatory consideration for business should be aware in Vietnam. So the floor is yours now, Anh Vinh.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin and Sam, for very interesting sessions. And the last session of the webinar today is about dispute. Specifically, I will go through 4 key aspects of dispute involving AI. So by way of introduction, my name is Luu Xuan Vinh, or you can call me Richard in English name. I am managing partner and also founder of Asia Legal, a business law firm based in Vietnam and great expertise in cross-border M&A transaction for investment, real estate. And in addition to such traditional practice area, we are also very active in technology, especially in new areas such as electronic transaction, AI, and personal data protection. We are actually one of the very few law firms in Vietnam capable to provide personal data protection services. And I'm also a listed arbitrator in some of the arbitration institutions in Vietnam and abroad, such as VIAC, DIAC, and ASICA, and Auscharm, and hold some leadership position in some of the organizations such as Swiss Vietnam Economic Forum, Vietnam M&A Association, and Vietnam Association of Foreign Invested Enterprise. So in my presentation today, I will guide you through 4 main parts. The first one, the common dispute involving AI and digital transformation. The second one is cyber attack as a way to escape from contractual obligation. And the third one, electronic evidence and e-discovery from data privacy to evidentiary disclosure. And the last one, why arbitration for tech dispute. Now let's move on to the first part, common dispute involving AI and digital transformation. Before going deep dive into the content, I would like to give you some figure. According to US AI dispute tracker, track US dispute involving AI across 50 states, classified by sector or an area of law. During the period 2021 and 2026, as you can see that the total cases recorded is 245 cases. And on top of that, the dispute in technology account for the highest percentage with 146 cases, followed by the law, AI, 88 cases. And also the law but privacy, 78 cases. And according to the Global Dispute Forecast 2025, 44% of respondents flag AI-related dispute and as a significant risk. And the top concerns is data privacy and security, with 60% share of respondent, followed by ethical dispute, 59%, and AI dispute, 55%. And reported AI incident, we can see that it has risen sharply, starting from less than 100 incidents until 2025, and it reached 362 in 2025. So what are the common disputes in AI? I believe that is not easy to list all the disputes in AI, given the fact that when technology changes and we have new type of dispute comes. And for this reason, in my presentation, I only list 4 common disputes involving AI, namely intellectual property dispute, data privacy and security dispute, and hallucination and bias disputes, and service level agreement and smart contract dispute. Now we go deep dive into the first common dispute, intellectual property dispute. This is actually the most contentious battleground, clearly divided into 2 distinct fronts: the input training data and also the output AI generated content. AI companies normally engage in large-scale web scraping to train machine learning models without obtaining the consents or authorization. And we have the first case study, the New York Times and OpenAI and Microsoft. Actually, it is a very typical example initiated due to AI models collecting mass of copyrighted articles to respond to user query. Specifically, in December 2023, the New York Times officially filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft in a U.S. federal court. And New York Times claimed that these tech giants utilize millions of their copyrighted articles to train large language models such as GPT-4 without permission or compensation. And we have a very fundamental question in this case. It is, does AI scraping available internet data for self-learning constitute fair use, or is it copyright infringement? Of course, the New York Times presented a lot of evidence targeting both the financial and reputational impact. But OpenAI and Microsoft, they also have their own argument. They argue that scrapping the internet to tech giant to teach AI to understand human language is a transformative act. And they compare this to a student. It looked like a student reading thousands of books to acquire knowledge before writing their own essay, rather than mechanical copying. In other words, the fair use shield for this situation. It's very funny, right? And from observing the global tech market and Vietnam digital economy development, I highlight two key points for Vietnamese enterprise. Vietnamese firms developing the large language models, for example, Zalo AI or Vinh AI, or even some tech giant in Vietnam like FPT, must be very cautious regarding input data source. Unauthorized wrapping of major news portal like VN Express or Thanh Niên newspaper can create significant legal risks when the regulatory framework for digital intellectual property merger. And the second one is that the litigation paved the way for new business model rather than confrontation. AI firms are increasingly partnering and paving and willing to pay content creator. And OpenAI multi-million-dollar contract with the Associated Press and Reddit serve as a prime example of legal data utilization. And it is a model for Vietnamese digital platform. They should consider to generate new revenue streams. And for the output and AI generated content dispute, the dispute is who owns AI generated works. If a marketing employee use Midjourney, for example, to create a corporate logo, and it's subsequently copied by a competitor, does the company have the standing to sue? Currently, most jurisdictions, including Vietnam, require authorship to be attributed to a natural person. Consequently, content generated 100% by AI remain ineligible for copyright protection. This poses a significant risk for business building models reliant on automated contents. Now let's move on the second common dispute, the data privacy and security dispute. We all know that AI thrives on data, and the more data, the smarter the AI. However, the boundary between AI training and privacy invasion is very thin. We can see that the insider threat, the employees may upload internal sources, code, or sensitive client database, for example, medical or financial record to ChatGPT for analysis. And this data become learning material for public cloud models and causing serious violation of non-disclosure agreement and data protection law. And We have two case studies here, but given the time limit, I only present the first case study, and it's a very interesting case study of Samsung Semiconductor. In 2023, Samsung Semiconductor division, which holds multi-billion-dollar core technology secret of Samsung Corporation, authorized engineer to use ChatGPT. And only less than a month, three major data leaks occur. The first one, an engineer copied confidential source code into ChatGPT to debug it. And the second scenario, the second leak, another engineer pasted the source code into the tool for optimization. And an employee uploaded an internet strategic meeting recording to generate meeting minutes. And the consequences are that under open AI policy, user input are stored on their server and used to retrain the models. And consequently, Samsung highly confidential source code became common property on OpenAI servers and causing a lot of legal risks for Samsung. It is very imperative to emphasize that Vietnam issued the law on personal data protection, and we also issued the decree number 356 guiding the law on personal data protection. This law tightened regulations on cross-border data transfer and mandate impact assessment for system utilizing fully automated and decision-making. If an enterprise utilizes third-party AI, such as server located in other countries, in foreign countries, to process the personal data of Vietnamese citizens without implementing anonymization mechanisms and obtaining proper consent, they will face serious legal penalty. The third common dispute is hallucination and bias dispute. And the first one, the dispute arising from financial loss due to misinformation. And we have the first case study here, the dispute between Moffat and Air Canada. In this dispute, the customers, Moffat, sought to book an urgent flight to attend a relative funeral, and he visited the Air Canada website and consulted the AI chatbot regarding bereavement fares. But instead of citing the accurate policy, the AI chatbot hallucinated a new rule. It advised Moffat to purchase a ticket at full price and submit a death certificate within 90 days to receive a partial refund. Moffat relies on this and purchasing ticket for 1,200 USD. And however, when he requested the refund, AI Canada refused, and Air Canada presented that the chatbot is separate legal entity, and the chatbot is responsible for its own action, and that the airline was not liable if the customer failed to click on the official policy link. Of course, the tribunal rejected this argument, and the tribunal ruled that Air Canada is responsible for all information on its website, regardless of whether it is a static page or an interactive AI chatbot. The airline was ordered to compensate the customer. It is very, that's a very interesting lesson for Vietnam in the context that in Vietnam, banks or security firms or insurance companies using AI chatbot very commonly. And under the law on protection of consumer rights 2023, enterprises are obligated to provide accurate information regarding products and services. And if the companies only place a very small words like AI may make mistake disclaimer in the corners of the screen, and then it does not waive any liability if a chatbot provide errors to the customer. And in terms of the bias in recruitment in landing, we have another case study, US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and iTutor Group. The iTutor Group, an online tutoring provider, utilize AI software for CV screening to save time for human resources. And they use AI so that the AI can automatically reject female applicants with over 55 and male applicants over 60, regardless of their superior experience or qualification. And over 200 qualified candidates were screened out at the initial stage. And the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sued the company for violating the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. And iTutor Group was forced to pay more than 300,000 USD in damage and remain under strict supervision regarding its recruitment processes for several years. It is also another lesson for Vietnamese fintech and digital transformation ecosystem, because we have the new laws on personal data protection already, and we have the guiding decree number 356. When enterprise have the fully automated decision-making system affecting user rights, then they are subject to legal oversight. If an enterprise cannot ensure explainability regarding why the AI made a specific decision, they are in violation of transparency principles in data processing under the law on personal data protection and also the decree number 356. And the fourth common dispute, the high-tech commercial contract dispute and smart contract. We can see that the violation of AI services, the service level agreement, it is one of the common dispute. The enterprise purchase AI solution from vendors. However, when the system crash or the AI model return result with very high latency or delay, causing transaction losses, then providing liability, whether due to the enterprise mistake or the AI black box errors, is really difficult. And in terms of implementation errors in smart contract, we can see that in the digital economy, digital asset and smart contract are executed automatically via code. And if there is a bug in the code causing asset to be misdirected or hacked, such disputes are extremely difficult to resolve in traditional courts due to the decentralized and cross-border nature of blockchain. And we have the case study here, MD Anderson and IBM Watson. The world-leading MD Anderson Cancer Center signed a $62 million contract with IBM to deploy the IBM Watson Health supercomputer. And the goal goes to use AI to read millions of medical documents and suggest optimal cancer treatment for MD for the hospital. But the project failed because the physicians discovered that IBM Watson suggested dangerous and very dangerous treatment protocols. And when the project was canceled, a dispute happened, and IBM blamed that the input data provided by the hospital is not sufficient enough, and it is inaccurate, and the hospital accused that IBM used a black box that lacked explainability, and it renders it impossible to justify the machine errors, thus violating the performance commitment of the solution. It is actually also a practical lesson for Vietnam, especially for banks and security firms in Vietnam, when they integrating third parties API into their system. If an AI system suffers from latencies of a few seconds only during high frequency trading, or misidentify a customer face leading to unauthorized withdrawals, so who provides compensation? It's very critical question that I believe that is a good lesson and good experience for banks and security firms in Vietnam. Let's move on to the part 2, the cyber attack as a shoe to escape from the contractual obligation. According to the statistic from on the losses incurred following cyber incidents, we can see that the global average cost of data breach is $4.44 million USD. And the figure in healthcare service is even higher, nearly 8 million USD. And in Vietnam, according to Vietnam National Cybersecurity Association in 2025, we can see that the cyber attacks on Vietnamese system in 2025 increased incredibly. And in today's online world, data and computer system are pretty much what keep businesses alive. And when a cyber attack shoot everything down, a huge legal question comes up. And was this an unavoidable accident that nobody could have stopped? Or is it simply the company fault for having terribly security? So we will start with a very common reason. When the system fail, using cyber attack as a force measure. Many enterprises, when suffering ransomware or cyber attack leading to system collapse, loss of data, customer data, delays in delivery, they immediately invoke the force majeure clause to refuse compensation. However, under modern legal lens, a typical cyber attack rarely meet the threshold for the force majeure test, and we will analyze this in the next slide. In addition, there's also the fake hack and insider jobs. This represents the dark side of the digital economy, particularly prevalent in the realms of blockchain and smart contract. And development teams may intentionally insert backdoors in source code, then fail to legitimize the misappropriation of millions of dollars from the partners or the investor. And we have two case study here, very popular case study. In terms of the force majeure tests, you can see that it's not easy to use force majeure as one of the way to get rid of contractual obligation. You can see on the slide that the force majeure criteria in terms of the objectivity and unforeseeability, and also irreversibility. It's not easy, right? Because for the legal fighting, for example, the arbitral tribunal or the court, they hardly accept that the cyber attacks occur daily and constitute an inherent risk in the digital economy. They expect that the enterprise are expected to anticipate and mitigate such risks when operating on public domain. And the fact is that most breaches result from outdated security system or human negligence. So it's not easy to escape from the contractual obligation and use the force majeure as a shield to get rid of, to get out of the contractual obligation. And for the next slide, I give you some recommendation, but given time limit, I leave it to you. We will go into the part 3, electronic evidence and e-discovery from data privacy to evidentiary and disclosure. We will start with the first point, the core paradox, duty to disclose and duty to protect. So when a commercial dispute happens, particularly in International Arbitration Centre like VIAC, SIAC, or ICC, the principle of transparency mandates that the parties produce all relevant evidence, and in the digital era, this cause a collision with the principle of data privacy. And you can see that under the principle of e-discovery, the party must collect all email accounts, messages, and server logs to identify evidence. But the thing is that the principle of data privacy provides that the parties only process data to the extent strictly necessary for the original purpose. So it caused a legal flashpoint that broad collection violate the principles of minimization, data minimization. At the same time, the parties under the principle of e-discovery must produce evidence to arbitrator, opposing counsels, and expert. But principle of data privacy provide that the parties is it prevents the third parties from accessing personal data without consent. And of course, it also causes a legal flashpoint. Producing redacted evidence constitute a data breach. The second point is that the e-discovery in the AI era, solving technology. So previously, reviewing millions of documents to filter for evidence took months and cost millions in legal fees. But today we can utilize AI for this task through technology-assisted review. And the senior counsel only need to mark a few hundred sample document as relevant or not relevant. And the machine learning system learn the counsel reasoning and automatically scan for the remaining millions of documents with high percentage of accuracy. And when the lawyers search through company messages, they are not just doing keyword search anymore. AI can mark out late night chats and notice when someone turns curves from normal to panic, helping them zero in on the exact proof they need. And in Vietnam, we have a legal minefield, the cross-border e-discovery and the legal number 356. So when the FDI companies or Vietnamese company participated in international arbitration, executing e-discovery face massive barriers from domestic law. For example, a Ho Chi Minh City-based firm export entire accounting server data and internet emails and compress into a zip file and then send via cloud to an arbitral tribunal in Singapore, for example, as evidence. Then, according to the decree number 356, this act is classified as unauthorized cross-border transfer of personal data. And the enterprise has not filed the DPA with the Ministry of Public Security in Vietnam. Then, and if the enterprise has not obtained any consent from the individual mentioned in those emails, then the enterprise pay up with penalties. We have the practical scenario dispute arising from shadow ID here. I just give you some information and I leave it to you after the webinar. We are going to the last part of the arbitration for tech dispute. When dealing with technology dispute, traditional litigation often falls short in two major areas where arbitration really shines. Firstly, let's talk about the need for tech-savvy decision makers. In a standard courtroom, if a significant obstacle, judges often lack the technical background required to interpret very complex source codes, understand the black box, or understand how smart contract actually work. Arbitration can address this challenge and can make it into an advantage. It gives you the autonomy to handpick an arbitrator who possess not only legal background, but also actually engineering and technological background needed to truly understand the dispute. And secondly, the absolute confidentiality. We all know that the confidentiality is a lifeblood of the tech industry, and traditional court proceedings are public by nature. And this means if you go to the court, the litigation filings and evidence and everything else, including the source codes or even the secret business strategies or sensitive client lists, are at risk of being exposed to the press or their competitors. Arbitration offers a massive advantage here because confidentiality is the foe in arbitration. The entire proceeding, from the sensitive e-discovery data all the way to the final award, remains strictly private. And in terms of the third point, let's talk about procedural flexibility and e-discovery. In the traditional court system, you are often dealing with very difficult procedures that simply struggle to keep pace with rapid technological advancement. A standard e-discovery protocol can be sluggish and actually lack a sophisticated digital tool needed to handle complex tech dispute. But arbitration can offer very clear advantages. An arbitral tribunal can establish tailored procedural orders, and this means the party can actually agree on the exact date and authorize the use of AI for technology-assisted review and determine how to verify forensic digital evidence like log files. And finally, let's look at the global enforceability. As many of you know, taking a national court judgment and trying to get it recognized and enforced in another jurisdiction is very difficult, and it almost needs a lot of staff and very complex. But arbitration bypass this headache entirely. And because we have the New York Convention 1958, and under the New York Convention, arbitral awards are recognized and enforceable in over 170 countries in the world. For example, a Vietnamese company hiring developers in India to build a software solution for a Japanese client. And this international enforceability is essentially your golden key, and it is the most reliable way to secure the right if the partner default or try or make the dispute happen. I'm going to turn our attention to the next slide. The slide displays a standard model arbitration clause from Vietnam International Arbitration Centre. The core language is very straightforward, but it's very important to get right. Don't put anything into the model clause. Simply use it. Why? Because it comes down to the fact that when you change the clause, then it may become the hybrid arbitration clause. For example, you select both arbitration and litigation for the dispute, then it becomes a hybrid arbitration clause. And when companies try to get overly creative or draft arbitration clause themselves, they often create ambiguities. So my suggestion is that please use the model arbitration clause of VIAC, and it's published on VIAC website. And for those who want to select the arbitrator in technology to support with the tech dispute, simply come to the VIAC website and select arbitration and select scope of activities, information technology. And it's so the list of arbitrator with technology background who can support, who can understand the technology, and who can support you to resolve the technology dispute. It is actually the last slide of my presentation. We're going to have a Q&A session right after that. I would like to give floor to the MC. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anh Vinh, for very informative presentation. So as Edwin already shared that after the presentation of the own speaker, I hope that you already have a little bit comprehensive picture of how the AI can affect the business and how we can resolve the risk that the business can face. Before we move to the Q&A session, one of the most wanted section of the webinar today, I think that please allow me to take the chance to introduce one of the upcoming event of Auscharm. So Mr. Vinh can have a time to take a break after quite a long presentation because he is going to the moderator of the Q&A session as well. On 6th of August, Auscharm is going to co-host with the Asia Commercial Bank of Vietnam to organize a World Business Forum. Business Forum called the Future Proofing the Business in Vietnam. So this forum is expected to cover the Vietnam macroeconomic outlook and also the M&A tendency in Vietnam, the emerging the business risk. So I think that this session is ideal for the CEOs, the business owner, the corporate strategy professional, and for all of you who interested in exploring about the business landscape in Vietnam and would like to hear the insight from the high-level, high-profile expert from the ACB Bank, from Ascension Vietnam, and also from the QBE as well. Please set the date. The workshop will be on the 6th of August. And also after the workshop, we will have a sundowner, the regular networking event of Auscharm. So if you have ever been in one of the networking event of Auscharm before, you will find that it is very cozy, warm, and welcoming opportunity for you to network and catch up with the fellow leaders, fellow business, and you can find a very valuable network after our event. So please allow me to extend our warm invitation for all of you, and Auscharm is looking forward to welcoming all of you to our workshop. So without further ado, I hope that you have enough rest after the presentation. So I will hand over to Mr. Vinh to moderate the Q&A section.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation of Sam and Colin, and the last presentation on the dispute by me. I think it's time for us to have the question, and I will give a priority for the question that's sent to the organizer before this webinar. I will start with Colin Blackwell first. I received the question from participants asking, when companies assess AI risks, are they focusing on where the real operational risks actually sit, or becoming so fixated on legal compliance that they miss the bigger picture? Colin.
Yeah, so it's kind of human psychology and nature to focus more on easy problems to solve. So if there's something like a policy and it's kind of paperwork, then it's nobody's fault. And it's companies then really go into the detail on looking at governance, compliance, all of these things. It's a natural reaction. But what happens if the real risk was your company going bankrupt because a competitor has overtaken you? That's much more important, but much more difficult to challenging to confront. It will involve ambiguity. It's going to involve dispute, all of these things that when you wake up in the morning, you don't really want to do. So there's a natural reaction where companies look more at internal risk than external risk. But if you were really looking at external risk, it's way bigger. So, you know, if your company goes bankrupt, you don't have to worry about your policies in the first place. So this is, again, just a matter of human nature, that people very naturally look to the easy risks and beat those to death rather than actually looking at what could seriously threaten the continuity of a business.
Okay, thank you, Colin. I have another question for Colin as well, but I would like to move to Sam for the next question first, and then I will return to you. Sam, do you have some question? And one of the question is that why do you think there is a rise in ransomware activity for the legal sector?
Thank you. And this was a real thing which QB were deliberating for a while, but we kind of came to the conclusion that ultimately the information legal firms hold, broadly speaking, is going to be so sensitive and valuable, and the impact on the reputation is so great that ultimately the motivation to end up paying a ransom is higher than potentially some other organizations where the information that might be stolen is not particularly overly compromising to the company themselves. So it comes from sort of a supply and demand perspective, and the demand from, as a law firm, you need to have it confidential, therefore there is motive to pay the ransom. So we think that systemically is a reason why globally that's why the ransom payments in a legal firm have gone up.
Mm-hmm. It is very, I think it is very, very interesting answers, but I'm also founder of a law firm. I see that ransomware, the hacker normally want to attack the company, let's say large scale companies, not a law firm, because law firms in Vietnam, for example, is quite small, right? So any other reason behind that?
Yeah, there's a point. Traditionally, it was the larger companies, but definitely in the world of AI now, going back to attackers automating their attacks.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it comes down to a principle: they don't really care who you are. At the end of the day, they can extort you if you're a law firm or it's QB. And actually, we're seeing a larger volume of incident in the what you would define humbly as an SME space.
Okay.
Because your ability to invest in sophisticated cybersecurity technology to protect against this is far less. Therefore, it becomes, you are, for the saying, the lowest hanging fruit. It is much easier. Criminals, it's a business model for them. They want return on investment. And if that means they can attack someone with minimal effort and still get paid for it, looking at the average ransom demand being paid is in the hundreds of thousands of US dollars, then they will do that. And they don't mind if that's SME. Sometimes it's preferred to go for SMEs because they are easier to target.
Okay.
And I would like to add one more point on that as well. What is harder for SMEs? Now, I will humbly say I've never started a business, so I fully respect every CEO who does. But your working capital to pay your staff and your service requirements at the end of the month, do you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash to make this payment? It's a very it becomes a very personal thing. So that is a real risk to companies in the SME space.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also got a question from participants. I think it is very common question because in Vietnam we have more than 97.5% small and medium-sized companies. And a question, as a small business owner, I heard a lot about the risk of AI. And if I want my staff to use AI tools like ChatGPT to improve productivity starting tomorrow, what is the bare minimum step I should take to ensure we don't accidentally leak sensitive customer data without needing a massive budget or a full-time legal team? It's a very interesting question, and I think it is a very common question as well. I think that you don't need a massive budget to start safe. The first one and the simple one you can do is to move away from personal accounts. And the absolute must-do step is to shift the team from free and public ChatGPT account to enterprise or Teams versions. And this provide, I believe, that a no training guarantee, meaning that our data will not be used to train the models. It's the first step. And the second step is that you implement a memo saying that the staff can use AI, but the staff are strictly forbidden from pasting names, addresses, phone numbers, or internet information into the prompt. Or before the employees can do that, they have to hide or delete all the sensitive information or information of the clients, of the partners, of employees, and something like that. And if you get these two things right, then I think that you can start safe from today without a massive budget or without paying a lot of money for a legal team to support and to build the policies, or to pay for the security company to pay for the cybersecurity measure or something like that. Thank you. Colin, another question. What should business leader do personally and practically to get themselves up to speed on AI quickly enough to lead rather than simply react?
Yeah, so AI is so simple to use. I call it kind of idiot proof, right? So you just talk to it, and it's the same skill in talking to an AI as a management skill. So I get a lot of like CEOs, they'll say, "Oh, I'm old, I'm not good at technology," and it's like, well, you don't need to be. This isn't like technology. I'm not a technology person, but I know how to delegate. I know how to review. I know what I want objective-wise. I know the context. These are all management skills. So the good news is, as a leader, as a more experienced person, you're already very good at AI, even if you've never spoken to it before, because it's the same skill as talking and managing staff. But you cannot delegate the responsibility of leading with AI. So you have to be hands-on yourself. And I often see CEOs, they go crazy, or the business owner goes crazy with AI when they realize that they're suddenly good at what they thought was inaccessible technology. And they absolutely automate tons of things personally, because they're the people who really care and are aligned with making the company successful. Other people could be fearful of their jobs, want to maintain an old manual process, but it's the leader who actually wants to really do something there. And if you delegate to staff who are trying to often protect their own self-interest. So I saw an example recently where there was a simple AI automation, literally 5 minutes, that anyone could have done themselves. We do as a free demo. But then someone asked a big software provider, how long would this take and how much would it cost? And from the way they asked the question, they obviously didn't know what they were doing. And the provider turned around and said it was going to cost $1.2 million and take 18 months to do. Now, if you agreed to say yes to that as a leader, you're going to either damage your business, or if you're a country manager and head office sends over internal audit, how are you going to justify making a bad decision? You'd either say, I had no idea about the technology, or, there's no good answer to that, or they'd ask you, what's your relationship with that vendor? So you have to have enough knowledge as a CEO or business owner so that nobody can pull a fast one and trick you, basically.
Thank you, Colin. It means that the first thing that the leader do is to change the mindset, right? They have to be AI expert first, and they don't delegate any responsibility to the staff, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, you don't even have to be an expert. You just need to switch it on and talk to it.
Okay.
It's so simple. The technology is solved.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have another question for Sam. In the world of agentic AI, do we still need humans? It's a very interesting question.
Yes, everyone thinks it's going to replace our jobs and we're not going to be able to do anything. And with the recent article of one of OpenAI's models escaping its protection lab earlier this week, there is cause for concern. But ultimately, I think I have a slightly more optimistic view of the whole thing. We will absolutely need humans. We are not going to fully be replaced. As Colin mentioned earlier in his presentation, there is regulatory requirements for it. Like, you have to have a human in the loop. But also, to get the most out of the AI, you need to set the parameters of what you want it to do, right? It won't inherently know your motives and your end goals. You have to tell it what to do. You have to steer it in the right direction, much like you do with an organization. You can't just hire 300 people and expect to grow and all this sort of stuff. You have to shape direction and narrative of what you want it to do. And those who use AI better in that sense against others will definitely be there as well. So I take an optimistic view on it. We will always need humans in the loop.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sam. And I got also another question. If my company AI make a mistake, for instance, giving a customer wrong advice that cause them financial loss, and the customer demand compensation, what should be our immediate response strategy? And how do we balance apologizing for the customer loss without exposing the company to unnecessary legal liability? It's a very interesting question because I believe that if there is a wrong response, then it won't be big problems for the company AI. So my answer is that when an AI make a mistake, your immediate response should be empathy, not admission. Don't be hurried to say we are at fault because our AI failed or something like that. Instead, you say that we are sorry for the inconvenience caused by the information provided, and we are launching internal investigation into the system to see the reason behind the failure. So with this one, you have more time to investigate whether the AI actually hallucinated or if simply the user error, and then you are promoting an investigation, not admitting to a defect, then quickly pivot to a human in the loop, bring a real person into review the AI advice and correct it manually. And in most cases, a human-led resolution is what the customer truly wants. Thank you. I got some other question into the chat box. Colin and Sam, are you willing to answer some of the question?
I have responded to questions myself in the chat already. Happy to answer any.
Yep, same here.
Okay. Okay, I believe that you still have some of the question, and because of the time limit, we could not answer all the question. Please send all the question to Auscharm, and then we are willing to provide writing answer after the webinar. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Colin, Sam, and Hương, for this interesting webinar. And I would like to give floor to Hương.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Sam, for very active and vibrant discussion during the Q&A section. On behalf of the AusCham Vietnam and VIAC, I would like to say thank you again for all attendees for taking the time to join us today. So please note that after the webinar, we will send to the registration, no matter you have a time to turn up today or not. Once you have a register for this webinar, you will receive the slide, video recording, and the contact information on the speaker. If you have any inquiries that's specific for you, you can contact them directly and raise the inquiries. So I think that they are very qualified, high qualified. So I hope that all the inquiries will be solved.